Alhamdulillah. I can hear yes.
I'm doing well, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Ustadh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, Sidi, Haji, what's going on?
Alhamdulillah, everything's good.
Alhamdulillah, it's good to hear your voice, man.
Mashallah, mashallah. I missed your presentation. What was that, yesterday?
Was it yesterday? No, Tuesday. Tuesday, yeah.
Man, we missed it.
Okay, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Somebody was off mute and it sounded like they were playing a recording of an older class, so I just muted that person. Alhamdulillah, let's go ahead and start. Welcome to our weekly Maliki Fiqh class. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدر من العظيم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. اللهم اني اسالك من كل خير سالك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم واعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما اخرنا وما اسررنا وما اعلنا وما انت اعلم منا. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم انا نعوذ بك من فتنه المحيا والممات ومن فتنة القبر ومن فتنة المسير الجالي ومن عذاب النار رسول المسير. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد ورضي الله عن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. يا همة الشيخ احضرنا بهذا المحضر ولتأتفي بنظرة تأتينا بالظفر. أما بعد. الحمد لله رب العالمين. Welcome everyone to our weekly Maliki Fiqh class. Alhamdulillah, I'm thankful and excited to have the opportunity to meet with you all. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to keep today's class brief. It is, we're in the home stretch of the Ramadan. So I don't want to keep you all very long because, I know me myself in these last few days, I'm trying to read some Quran and trying to do some things, get some things done. But I wanted us to at least meet and get the benefit of meeting, inshallah ta'ala. I'm going to start by reading a brief hadith, as you know is my habit to do. Can everybody can hear me correctly? Hear me well, correct? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And we're gonna try to save some good time for some question and answers today as well. But the hadith that I want to share is a hadith about zakah, and I just quickly searched the hadith about zakah. Just so you know, just to have a conversation about it. When it comes to narrating hadith and information like that. Assalamu alaikum. Uncle Yahya, how you doing, Sidi?
Alhamdulillah, man.
Alhamdulillah, good to see you. But when it comes to sharing, information, hadith, there's a balance that we need to have. Some people, they'll look in the book, they'll open the hadith, and they'll run with the hadith without any context, without having studied the hadith, and that can get them problems, right? Other people will say, well, if you haven't studied the hadith and don't have it with a chain, isnad, you haven't studied it from a teacher, then you don't read hadith, right? These are kind of two extremes. And neither one of them, I would say, is really proper. You can read hadith, especially books of hadith like, Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith, or I think it's Imam Bukhari's Adab al-Mufrad. Like, these are books of hadith. Riyad al-Salihin, these are books of hadith that are really meant for you to read and that will help to improve your faith, give you some good guidelines of how to operate, right? But when you open up a hadith that gives you some specific information about a technical thing, right? Generally speaking, before you act on something that's not clear, right? You want to go and get some guidance from a teacher, right? But you can read hadith on your own, and many of the hadith that I share with you all, some of them are hadith that I had the opportunity to read with a teacher, but I have not studied hadith extensively. So most of them, or many of them, are hadith that I just find that are relevant to the subject, to the fiqh and whatnot. And this is okay until you find a hadith that says something that, may seem odd or may seem specific or technical, right? Those are hadith that you want to get clarification. I'll give you an example. There's a hadith that talks about, and maybe there's several hadith that talk about the fact that you should sit when you eat a meal, right? And so you find people that take that one hadith, and if they see somebody eating or drinking anything while they're standing up, they be ready to give them a hard time. Oh, brother, don't you know you're supposed to sit when you eat? Even me myself, when I was a young man in my teens and 20s, I came across this hadith, and if I was drinking some water or something, I would squat in the middle of the street and drink my water, But then as I got a little bit more educated, I found from Sheikh Amin, right? Sheikh Amin taught us, no, this is talking about when you sit down to eat a meal, right? This isn't talking about, oh, you take a swig of water, you pop something in your mouth. And he mentioned a hadith where I believe Sheikh Amin mentioned this hadith to us, but it was so long ago, I could be confusing it with a lesson from somebody else, but it was probably Sheikh Amin because that's who I spent the most time studying with. He said there was a time when Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu faced the Kaaba, standing up, took some water and drank it to show the people that it was permissible, right? So that's just to give an example. Right, just to give an example. But without further ado, the hadith I wanted to read today, this is a hadith that is collected in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, rahmatullahi, one of the 6 very reliable or most reliable, according to many scholars, Sunan, books of hadith. This one is reported from Abdullah ibn Muawiyah, and it's reported that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever does 3 deeds will taste the sweetness of faith. One who worships Allah alone, one who declares that there is no God but Allah, no God other than Allah, and one who gives charity from his or her wealth each year with a cheerful and earnest soul, right? So worships Allah alone, doesn't associate any partners with Allah, declares that there's no God but Allah, so it makes the declaration of the Shahada, which a person makes when they become Muslim, and which we make every day when we make Salah. You call the adhan, the shahadas and the adhan, so we always, often are making this declaration of faith. And third, the one who gives charity from their wealth every year in a cheerful, earnest way. And so I open up with that because I want to just briefly, for about maybe 10 minutes, review some of the main rules of zakat. And the reason I want to do this is because as we enter into the last 10 days of Ramadan, many people are in the habit or may want to get in the habit of paying their annual zakat during Ramadan. You can pay it whenever you want, as long as you pay it once every year on the lunar calendar, once every year. But many people choose to pay it during Ramadan, sometimes in the last 10 days of Ramadan, or some people choose to do it during the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, the month of the Hajj, because these are times when the reward for good deeds is multiplied. Allah says He gives you greater reward for doing good deeds in these times. So a lot of people like to give their zakat during these times. So as we enter into the end of Ramadan, I thought it would be useful to have a brief review of some of the points of zakah. And we're not going to get super technical. If you have questions, please ask them. I may not have the answer for you. Zakat is not a subject that I have a strong sort of specialization in or anything like that, So if you have very specific questions, I would encourage you to maybe go to other teachers, or I can connect you with people, or I can take your question to some of my teachers to give you a specific answer if you need a specific answer, but we want to at least give a general overview as a way to kind of give us a little bit of a reminder to pay zakat. So the first thing we'll say is zakat, of course, is one of the 5 pillars of the religion. It's something that is obligatory. It is one of the most obligatory things. It's mentioned along with salah in the Quran. I think one of the lectures that I heard said more than 30 times, right? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he fought the people after the time of the Prophet ﷺ who said they didn't want to pay zakat. So, oh, we don't think we got to pay zakat. He actually fought against them, right? Which, it implies that he felt that they were outside of what was acceptable in Islam, that they were outside of Islam. Now, Allahu Alam in terms of a theological position of where they were, but, it implies that they were considered to be outside of the fold of Islam in some sense, that he would fight them because they wouldn't pay zakat, right? So, Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Zakat is very important. The word zakat has to do with like a purification. They compare it to like when you eat some food, right? Let's say you eat an apple. There's some of that apple that goes into your body as nutrition, right? And some of it that has to be expelled in your waste, right? When you go to the bathroom, right? So they say zakat, the linguistic meaning, it's something kind of similar in the sense that you have some of your wealth that has to be taken out of your hand in order to purify what stays in your hand, right? So some of your wealth, some people they talk about it as charity, which is accurate because zakat is for people in need, the needy people, but it's distinct from sadaqah, right? Sadaqah is just charity that you give because you decide you want to give charity. Whereas zakat is a charity that you have to give. So it's not a charity in the sense that you have the option to give or not. In that sense, it's something that you have to give. It's more of an obligation. So sometimes people translate zakat as the poor tax, or I've heard different kind of quirky translations that are all good. I'm not saying that they're bad translations, but I think it captures the fact that there's nothing specific. There's nothing that's exactly the same in a sort of regular English vocabulary. So people call it the poor rate, but it's the money that you owe, that you must give as a Muslim to attend to the needs of the people who are in need. And there are 2 forms of zakat. There's zakat al-mal and zakat al-fitr. So I'm going to start by talking about zakat al-fitr because that's the quick one. Zakat al-fitr is the money that you pay at the end of Ramadan, right? Before Eid al-Fitr, which is the Eid at the end of Ramadan. And it's the amount of money roughly to give someone a good meal, right? They have a specific calculation they do where there was a particular amount of food that they would give during the Prophet ﷺ's time. But now most people are giving money, which I would actually say is good, right? It's good to give money because in the society and the times that we live, sometimes a little bit easier and more convenient to give money, but it's permissible to give food, But also I normally give money, so I kind of understand how to give it easier in terms of money. They say it's about, some say $10. I've heard recently when I went to a masjid during this past week, someone said $12 this year is what some of the scholars are saying. $12 is how much you should estimate to give for your zakat al-fitr. And zakat al-fitr is paid on behalf of yourself and all of your dependents. So all of the people that you are obligated to take care of in your household. So this is like your wife, if you're a man. This is your children. So your wife, if you're married. If you're a man and you're married, it's your wife, and your children, right? The people under your care, your dependents. Or if you're a single person, then just yourself. If you're a single man or a single woman who's taking care of yourself and you're not dependent on anybody, then you pay it on behalf of yourself. So let's say, for instance, you are the head of a household of 4 people and you pay $12 on behalf of each of those 4 people. That would be $48 as you would pay in zakat. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. So, and someone just said someone just said in the chat that, they live in an area where there are people who are saying that they encourage Muslims to give food instead of money. There's a political dynamic there. I think some of the Salafis, from my cursory understanding, they say it's good to give food. And I'm not sure why. I think maybe because they're looking at what the Prophet ﷺ did in his time and trying to be as exactly like that as possible. But the scholars of a more traditional approach, who I think are a little bit more balanced, will say, yes, we follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, but we also recognize the different context that we live in. And this is going to come up again in a moment when we talk about something called the nisab, the amount that you have to have in order to obligate you to pay zakat. But in any case, just to give a sort of quick, explanation, in the era where we live, where, in the time where we live, yes, I made a distinction between zakatul fitr and zakatul mal. Exactly. The zakatul mal is, somebody sent a direct message. Zakatul mal is the zakat you pay once a year on your wealth. The zakatul fitr is the zakat you pay once a year during Ramadan, specifically before the Salatul Eid, right? Some opinions say you should pay it before Eid day, and some opinions say you should pay it before the Eid Salah. But again, $12 is what some people are saying this year, but it's the amount of money roughly to have a good meal. And part of the reason why my understanding from my teachers is that it's good to give money is because, let's say, for instance, you're giving zakatul fitr to somebody who's in need, who got to buy formula for the baby. You know what I'm saying? By saying we're only going to give you a pot of rice, you may actually be undermining the usefulness of this zakat. So I think this is a little bit of a well-intentioned misunderstanding when people say, oh, you should give food and not give money. It's permissible to give food, but it's also permissible to give money. And it's often more convenient both for the giver and the person who's receiving to get money, right? And a part of the wisdom of the zakat that I've heard from some of the knowledgeable people is that you want to make sure that during the Eid, everybody gets a chance to, be happy on the day of the Eid. It's hard for somebody to celebrate the Eid when they're hungry, but if everybody who's in need can get those few extra dollars to make sure they can eat a good meal Eid day, make sure they got milk, formula for the baby, that kind of stuff, you know what I'm saying? That, helps to make sure that the Eid is a nice, enjoyable day for all of the Muslims, regardless of their financial situation. Nah, somebody said many people are in need have food assistance from the government as well, like food stamps and stuff like that. It's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. So I encourage people to give money, and you can give it to any masjid or imam or sheikh that is responsible for kind of governing a community that will then distribute it to the people in need, right? So you can give it to your local masjid, or you can give it to some imam, some sheikh that that's taking care of people and distributing the zakat. All of that is fine and permissible. Yeah, alhamdulillah. So, and like I said, I recently heard $12. That's what I'm going with, but it's an estimate. So if you go to the masjid and the masjid said $10, you can give $10, right? If you go to the masjid and they say $13, you can give $13, but it's for you and all the dependents in your care. So that's kind of the easy one. If we have questions about that, jot them down, because I want to make sure we take the next maybe 10 minutes to go through some of the points of zakat al-mal, right? And then we can ask questions about all of them together, inshallah ta'ala. So what is zakat al-mal? Zakat al-mal means zakat on mal, which is wealth, right? Zakat on your wealth. This is paid once every lunar year, right? And it's zakat that you pay on the money that you've held for a year, for at least a year. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, be more specific. But if you've had money for a year, and you've had money beyond the nisab for a year, then you pay zakat on that once a year. It can be any time during the year. Like I said, people often customarily pay it during Ramadan or during the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. And the amount that you pay, the general amount is 2.5%. I remember when we used to ask Sheikh Amin about this, Sheikh Amin told us, and Sheikh Amin, big scholar, right? Sheikh Amin said, I don't, have know that much, or I have a lot of expertise on zakat. He said, because most of my students are people who are eligible to accept zakat, to receive zakat, rather than people who have to pay zakat. So this shows you something about both Dr. Dunya, Sheikh Amin's teacher, in terms of what he prioritized and who his students were, and something about Sheikh Amin in terms of who his students were, right? So there's two opinions with regard to how much money you have to pay zakat, right? And this is based on the fact that, so during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a certain amount of gold that you had, and if you had that an amount of gold or an amount of wealth that equaled the value of a certain amount of gold, I think it was something like 3 ounces or something like that, then you had to pay zakat, or something like maybe 21 ounces, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong about the amount, but a certain amount of silver. And that amount of gold and silver were equal, right? So if you had that amount of wealth, then you paid zakat. But today, more than 1,400 years later, the amount of gold and silver has fluctuated. So if you take that amount of gold and silver that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ equaled about the same, now today, if you take that amount of gold, it equals about $5,300, right? If you take that amount of silver, it equals about something like $500, right? So there's a wide gap. And the scholars have different opinions as to which amount you should use. One reason for saying the higher number is that it acknowledges the fact that, you have people who may have, that bare minimum of $500 or something like that, but who are still poor, who are still impoverished, right? Especially in a place like this where, the cost of living may be very high, right? But if you take the lower number, the lower threshold, part of the benefit of that is that more of us, can give something of our wealth to make sure that the people who are the most in need have something. So I don't really have a strong opinion as to which value system you should use. I suspect that Sheikh Amin probably was looking at the higher value, which is probably why he said that most of his students were people who qualified to receive zakat rather than pay it. But I go by the smaller amount, generally in my own affairs, but you have the right to do either. If this is a source of some real confusion or hardship, then you can go to, one of the other teachers. You can go to your local imam, or, I would go to Sheikh Mahi, or, there's other people here in the States that I defer to as well on issues of zakat. So that's an issue. We can talk about it offline, but generally speaking, I go with the lower number, but you have the right to do either one. They're both acceptable. So now, once you see that you're a person who has to pay zakat, right? What do you pay zakat on? So if you have money that you're not, first of all, you don't pay zakat on anything that you use for your everyday life. So if you got money in the bank, but you have that money in the bank because you got paid, right, on the first, and you have to take that same money and pay your rent on the second, you don't pay zakat on that, right? You don't pay zakat on that. Let's say you own a house, but this is the house you live in with your family. You don't pay zakat on that, right? Let's say you have a garden. You got tomatoes in your garden, but you're not no farmer. This is just your own personal tomatoes in your garden that you eat. Maybe you give to your friends. You don't pay zakat on that, right? You don't pay zakat. You say you have a car, and it's a car that you drive. You don't pay zakat on that, right? You only pay zakat on wealth that you're not using to attend to your regular needs, your day-to-day needs, right? Now, one area where there is some difference of opinion comes with jewelry, right? Jewelry, because jewelry is something that is gold and silver, And the Prophet ﷺ said you pay zakat on gold and silver, not diamonds, not platinum, not anything like that, but gold and silver specifically, right? If you're wearing it as jewelry, some say you don't pay it. Others say you do pay because it's specifically gold and silver. And the majority opinion, the opinion that I think of most of the Malikis hold, which is the school of thought that we follow as our baseline. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the folks who just joined. But we're just talking about we're just doing a brief review of some of the points of zakat, because many people, they choose to pay their zakat during this time of year, during Ramadan. You don't have to, but many people do. So we figured we'd take it as an opportunity to do a quick review of some of the rules of zakat. So the woman's jewelry or the man's jewelry, man might have a nice watch that has a lot of value, right? If it's silver, men, we don't wear gold. Generally, there is an opinion that says that if the man is traveling, they can have some gold in the form of jewelry, just as a store of wealth in case they need it. They can wear a gold watch and then use that gold watch if they have to use it for money. That's a kind of a nuanced opinion, but generally speaking, the men, we don't wear gold. Men in Islam, we don't wear gold. We're not supposed to wear gold. We can wear silver and we can wear other things, and the women can wear gold or silver or whatever they choose. So specifically gold and silver, you pay zakat on that if you have it. But if it's jewelry, most of the scholars say you don't pay zakat on that. So if the woman has some jewelry, she has a nice jewelry collection, and maybe she got some pieces from her mother, maybe her husband gave her a gift, something like that. Or the man, maybe your wife gave you a nice Rolex watch or something like that, right? You don't have to pay zakat on that. That's the more popular opinion. There are some scholars who say you do, and they have firm evidence for that. But the opinion that I learned from my teachers was that you don't pay zakat on those things. So we make it easy and let you know you don't have to pay zakat on that. But if you hear something from a different teacher, or you want to pay zakat on your, that it's not, there is a ruling, there is an opinion that says you can. Sidi Yahya, you talking to me?
No.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna put you on mute, inshallah, if that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. But your money that is in your bank account that you don't use to pay your everyday, day-to-day bills, that you must pay zakat on. And you pay it at a rate of 2.5%, right? Now, how do you go about calculating this wealth that you pay 2.5% on? So, technically speaking, you're only obligated to pay your zakat on money that you've had for a year, right? And so I know in the past what I've done is I've looked through my bank account, my bank statements, and looked for the smallest number, right? And said, okay, that is the amount of money I've had over the course of a year. That's what I'm gonna pay my zakat on, right? And this is a permissible way, but as I've continued to learn and ask the advice of the scholars, what I find is that most of the knowledgeable people, they say, the scholars say, to make it easy on the people who just get a paycheck, the salaried employee, right? The person who the way you make your money is you get a paycheck, right? The easiest way to do it is to pick a date, one date every year, and don't worry about how your account went up and down over the course of the year. Look at that date and look at the money you have in your account that day, and you pay 2.5% on that. That's the easy way, and it's acceptable. It's what the scholars, encourage us to do, right? So let's say your day is the 27th of Ramadan. You say, every day on the 27th of Ramadan or the 29th of Ramadan, let's say, every day on the 29th of Ramadan is when I pay my zakat. Okay, you look at the 29th of Ramadan, how much money you got in your account that's not a part of your rent money and grocery money and stuff like that. It's just your savings, basically. And you say, okay, I got $10,000 on my savings. Okay, I'm gonna pay 2.5% of that, which is something like, what would 2.5% of $10,000 be? I guess it would be like $250, something like that. that's what you would pay on zakat. Now, like I said, there's a more nuanced way where you look and see, you know, how much money, how your account fluctuated. And if you want to, you know, dive into that, alhamdulillah. But if you just want to make sure you're doing what's acceptable, right, and make it easy for yourself, the scholars say they actually suggest to make it easy. You look at what you have on what they call your zakat anniversary, that one day every year that you want to pay zakat, and you look at what's in your account that day, right, every year, and you pay 2.5% of that. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam, Habib.
How you doing, Dad?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Ramadan Mubarak, God.
Ramadan Kareem, alhamdulillah. We're just doing a brief overview of some of the rules of zakah, because a lot of people like to pay their zakat during Ramadan. So we just given a quick overview of some of the rulings of zakah, inshallah ta'ala. And as we mentioned, you have zakat al-mal, zakat al-fitr, and whatnot. So the zakat al-mal, like we said, 2.5% on the money that you've held for a year, or the money that's in your account that you, on the date that you pick as your annual day to pay zakat, right, on the lunar calendar. So some people say this date during Ramadan, or some people say this day during the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, when the Hajj season comes, right? And they like to pay it on that day. So they say what you got on that date, that's not money that you use for your day-to-day, right? And you pay zakat on that at a rate of 25%, right? That's the easiest way to sort of calculate it.
2.5.
Alhamdulillah. Somebody said, what about debts? Do they include taking those debts into consideration for the calculations? So I'm not sure. I think that it depends on what kind of debt it is. When you talk about like debts that you owe to like companies, like student loans and stuff like that, I don't think they take that into consideration, right? I don't think they take that into consideration. But if it's a debt to like a person that you need to pay, you know, that you owe money to, then I think I don't remember what they taught us about that, to be honest. So I would say for that, if you're in a specific situation, we can find you information for that situation. Credit card debt, you know, from what I remember, listening to different lectures from the scholars about this, I don't think they said you take that into consideration. I think if it's a debt that you owe an individual, you pay that debt. Now, if you use, and this is tricky, right? Because and it's a great question. If you use your credit card more like a charge card, which is actually what I would encourage everybody to do from an Islamic standpoint, because we're taught that interest is haram. So we avoid the interest, right? So if you use your credit card like a charge card and you buy things on your credit card, and then at the end of the month, you pay that credit card balance off so that it doesn't accrue any interest, right? If you do that, then you can subtract the credit card debt amount, because that's part of your monthly expenses, right? So if you use your credit card to pay groceries, then yes, you look at, okay, I got this money in my account, but I got to use it to pay off the credit card to pay for my groceries. Then I would take that into consideration, right? Or just pay it before the zakat anniversary comes to make it a little bit easier, right? If you can. But if you're using your credit card where you're keeping a balance, right? Where, you know, you got $1,000 of credit card debt or $10,000 of credit card debt that you're paying down, technically, they would say you shouldn't do that because it's something that's haram. Practically speaking, we live in a society that makes it very difficult for some of us to avoid things like riba and interest, right? So, you know, it would be unrealistic to just presume that nobody has that problem, right? Of course, some practicing good Muslims with faith got credit card debt, unfortunately, right? So if you're in that situation, you still wouldn't use the credit card debt to calculate your zakah, because you wouldn't calculate zakah on something that's interest bearing. That's my understanding, right? You wouldn't calculate it on something that's interest bearing because that's something that's seen as haram anyway, you know? So I would say, no, you don't take that into account, right? Now, if somebody has major credit card debt to where this is actually a big burden on them financially, right? Then I don't know. I would say if that's your situation, then we should talk to somebody who has a little bit more knowledge to give you some advice for your personal situation, right? So if that's your situation, or you know somebody in that situation, maybe we can talk offline to give you a more concrete answer. Because being burdened by debt is actually one of the things that makes you eligible to receive zakat. There's like 8 categories of people who are eligible to receive zakat, but 2 of them are kind of like more frequent. The rest are a little bit less, like there's one, the traveler who doesn't have access to their money when they're traveling. This was more of an issue back before you had bank accounts and ATM cards, right? Person might have money, but they're traveling in a land where they can't access their money. That person could receive zakat. Or a person who's enslaved, right? Most of the scholars would say that's not a big reality anymore. Now, some would say that being incarcerated is a form of slavery. And I actually find that argument quite compelling, right? But in any case, slavery is something that's not a reality today like it was in the past. So to say you can use your zakat to free a slave is depending on whether you're talking about the incarcerated person or not, you may not, really have a place for that. So the 2 main ones that are relevant in our time are the person who's a faqir. That means a person who doesn't have nothing, who's indigent, like the homeless person, the person who just doesn't have any money, or the person who's miskeen. And the miskeen person, that's like the needy person, they may have some money, they may have a house, they may have a car, but they may be burdened by debt, right? Or they may be living below the poverty line, so they don't have enough money to pay the light bill every month. They scuffling to pay the light bill. That's a person who's miskeen, right? And this, now you understand again why Sheikh Amin said most of his students were people who were eligible to receive zakat. Because if you live in as a working class person, especially in a big city like New York, there's a high chance that you might fall in that category where, you're needy, you're struggling check to check, as they say, month to month to make it. So I don't really I don't really know how to answer that question. I don't have a concise answer for that question, other than to say, case by case. If you're somebody who you're not sure, you got some credit card debt, right? Or somebody comes to you and say, I got credit card debt. Do I got to pay zakat? I would say, that's kind of, as they say, above my pay grade, right? It's something I would want to do some research and connect you with some people or ask some people who I feel like are more knowledgeable to give you a tailor-made answer for your own specific situation, inshallah ta'ala. Somebody said, what if you pay off your debt from your account a day before your zakat anniversary and what is left is just 100%? Is that cheating? No, that's not cheating, because your debt is something you got to pay. Your debt is something you got to pay. So if you get that debt, you pay off that debt, you say, alhamdulillah, I paid off the debt. Now all I got is $100, then that's all you pay zakat on. That's not cheating, right? Someone said, if the 2.5% will come to an amount with cents, is it permissible to round up by $1? Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I don't see any problem with that. The scholars say you don't want to just round so much. You want to be a little bit precise with the zakat, because you want to have the intention to give zakat as zakat. Zakat has to be given with the intention as zakat. You can't say, well, I'm going to give $1,000 in charity and that covers my zakat. No, you want to give $1,000 in charity? That's sadaqah. But zakat, you have to pay. So it's part of your ibadah to actually go through the calculation to see, this is how much money I have. Alhamdulillah, right? And to see, there are people who don't have this. Let me be thankful. Let me give exactly what I'm supposed to give for my zakat, to my zakat. But if you round up to the nearest dollar, I don't see any problem with that. I don't see any problem with that, because even, most of the time when we talk about the nisab, and there's some rounding going on. So I don't see any problem with rounding by $1, right, to the nearest dollar, just to make your situation a little bit easy. But rounding a lot to say, I probably got to give about $1,000. I probably got to give about $100 as zakat. I would advise you not to do that. Do the calculation. But once you've done the calculation, if you round up by $1, alhamdulillah, that's fine. Because if you're giving your zakat to a person or an institution, even by cash, it may not be conducive to say, well, here's $100.25, right? It may be better to just give 101 or something like that. Someone said talking about riba kind of off topic. Can I buy a house with a loan? That is off topic. It's a much longer conversation. The short answer I'll give you is there's different opinions. I personally am of the opinion that it's fine to take a loan to buy a house based on two things. One, based on the fact that Sheikh Amin taught us, so I can say this comfortably, that you're not supposed to have to take a loan to do things you need to do for your existence. In an ideal Islamic society, you wouldn't have to take out a loan, for instance, to go to school or to get your medical care needs met if you need an operation or something like that, or to have a decent home, not a mansion, but a decent home for what you need, right? So in this society where you have to sometimes take out loans for that, inshallah, we'll be forgiven for that. The second reason I'll say, in my opinion, it's permissible to take out a loan is because the Islamic Sharia compliant mortgage loans that are out there, I don't find to be significantly different than the conventional loan. In fact, you can get an Islamic mortgage loan and then they sell your mortgage to the regular non-Muslim interest charging loan company. So, bank. So I don't really see a lot of difference, except that, if you do a Sharia compliant loan, you got to pay more money up front. Your upfront costs will be higher, which just disadvantages the Muslim who's poor. So if you want to try to do things in a halal way, you got this elaborate system that just makes you have to pay more money, but isn't tangibly very different. So that's my personal opinion. If somebody wants to go get a Sharia compliant loan, alhamdulillah, I believe Allah will reward you for the good intention of stretching to do something that's a little bit closer to what's acceptable Islamically. But if you look at the Sharia compliant loan, you're like, I can't really afford it if I do it that way. But if I do it the conventional way, I can afford to buy my house. I would say, I believe, my opinion is that it is permissible for you to do the conventional loan, and Allah knows best. Allah knows best. It's just my personal opinion from talking to different scholars and doing a little bit of research. But, that's just my opinion, right? I would say it's not haram to use a loan to buy a house for you to live in. Now, if you buying property to build wealth, maybe that's a little bit different, right? Deeper conversation we can get into about, is it more important for you to do the personal thing that's more in line with the sunnah, or is it more important for you to, build the level of wealth, or us as a community to build the level of wealth that we would need to build in order to create a different system? Very long, nuanced, complicated conversation that's beyond the scope of this class, but hopefully that, inshallah, can give you some help as you make the decision of what to do for yourself.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I have a question.
Sure.
So how then do, I don't know if it's all masjids, but a lot of masjids, they tell you, you can ask what you have to pay. They give you a number that they say the zakat is.
Uh-huh.
They give you a certain amount.
Yeah.
So how they calculate that for everybody?
So the way they calculate the amount, that's when they're talking about the zakatul fitr, the zakat that you pay at the end of Ramadan, as a way to ask Allah to forgive us for any shortcomings in our fast. And like I said, part of the wisdom in that I've heard from the knowledgeable people is that it kind of helps ensure that even the poor people in the community can have a good Eid, right? So the amount for that is about the amount that you would use for a good meal, for a decent meal, right? So that's what they're calculating. They're estimating, because during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was a certain amount of food. So they look at how much that food, was like a good meal during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They estimate what a good amount for a basic good meal would be, living in America today. So they say, usually they'll say like around $10. Now I've heard some people say 12. So it's an estimate, but that's where they're getting that number from. Does that make sense?
But that's different than what you're calculating, your what you got in your account.
That's different. The zakatul mal, the zakat that you pay once throughout the year, every year on your wealth, the 2.5%, that's going to be different for every person. Some people there's going to be $2.50 because all they got in their savings is $100. Some people is going to be $2,000 because they got much more in their savings. And some people are not going to have to pay anything because they're never going to have enough wealth beyond what they call the nisab, the threshold, to necessitate that they pay zakat. They may actually be people who can qualify to receive zakat. Does that make sense?
So there's a difference in what you have in your savings and what you have in your checking account?
Not in terms of accounts, but the reason I said savings is because you don't pay zakat on the money that you got to use to live day to day. So you don't pay zakat on the rent money, right? Now, how you distinguish between the rent money and your savings is up to you. Some people, maybe the rent money is in the checking account and the savings is in the shoebox, right? Other people, the rent is in one account, the savings in another account, you know. However you need to separate them for yourself, you can separate. Some people is all in one account. Then you got to start doing some calculations. Okay, this much money I pay for rent, this much money I got to pay for groceries. So after I do all of that, this is how much money I got left over. And it's $1,000. Okay, that's more than the nisab, right? Depending on which nisab you use. Okay, so I got to pay zakat on that. You follow me?
I follow you. So if you don't have no money in savings, and the way black folks is now,
If you don't have,
example here in America,
if you don't have any wealth that you have held for a year, you don't have to pay zakat. Meaning if at no point in time, so I said before that there's two nisabs calculations. I don't want to get too complicated rehashing that stuff, but if there's one that says you have to have about, I think it's like $500, and another one that says you have to have like $5,300. Let's say we take in the one that's closer to 500, right? If at no time throughout the course of a year do you have $500 that's just sitting, it's not rent money, it's not light bill money, it's not grocery money, it's just savings. If you never reach a point where you have $500 that's just sitting as savings, then you do not have to pay zakat for that year. If at some point in time in that year you had at least $500, right? Then you look at whatever money you have beyond what you need, beyond the rent money, beyond.
you dropped out. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. There's no sound.
What picture?
Yeah, he probably fell off the call. He'll probably join back in a moment.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My internet went down, so I got kicked off. So we're back on the phone. But I don't know if you heard the last thing I said, that I was saying that so basically throughout the course of a year, like we said, there's two ways that you can calculate the nisab. Let's take the smaller one. I think it's something like $500 or something like that. And I'll try to find the exact number while we're on the phone, just for everybody to benefit, inshallah. But if you have, so let's say it's $500 or let me actually give you the number, inshallah ta'ala. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammad. But if you have, if at no point in time during the year, so it's about $600, I think they say this year, right? So if at no point in time do you have $600 in your account or $600 in your possession, that's not for the rent money, that's not grocery money, that's not monthly bill paying money, that's just sitting. If there's no point in time in the year where you have $600 that's just there, that's not allocated for anything, then you are not obligated to pay zakat. If you have that amount of wealth at some point in the year, right? Then when it comes time to pay your zakat, you look at what money you have still that's just sitting, right? Let's say I had $600 during the year, right? Now, when it comes down to pay the zakat, I just paid off, some unexpected debt, or I gave some money away in charity, right? And so now all I got is $100. Well, at some point in time during the year, I had 600 or 700, over 600. So I'll consider myself zakat eligible. But now when it's time to pay the zakat, I look at the money I got to pay rent. I look at the money I got to use to pay my car note. I look at the money I got to use for groceries. I look at the money I got to use to pay zakatul fitr, right? And after all of that, all I got that's just sitting is $100. Then I pay my zakat on that $100. If I don't have anything left that's just sitting, I don't pay zakat on that money. I don't pay any zakat that year. Does that make sense? You follow me that?
I follow you.
Yeah. So people who don't have many money don't pay any zakat. This is why, like I said earlier, I said before in the class, Sheikh Amin used to tell us, majority of my students are eligible to receive zakat. They're not obligated to pay zakat, right? So, so there's many people who aren't, obligated to pay zakat, but don't be fooled. There's also many people who do have to pay zakat. We sometimes get into this mind state that, we all poor, black people, we ain't got no money. There's plenty of people in our community that got $1,000 in savings, $2,000 in savings, $10,000 in savings, and those people have to pay the zakat. And this is also, I always kind of dip into like certain political economic conversations, but it's also a pathway toward a level of self-determination. If all of us in our community who have some wealth took our wealth and paid the appropriate zakat, it will go a long way to help us. Yes, the recordings are saved, and I'll try to answer your question right now if you could hold on for a quick minute. But it would go a long way to giving us some independence, right? So that we're not so beholden to the government. But the reality is there's a wealth disparity. So I'll share this really quickly. There is a book called Capital by an economist named Piketty, and this economist Piketty said that if all the people in the world could identify their wealth, not the money that they have that they use to pay bills, but their wealth, right? If we could identify everybody in the world's wealth and tax it at a rate of something like 2.5%, we could end the level of poverty and food insecurity and gross economic income inequality that we have in the world. And he's not even Muslim. He came up with that same calculation. So, mashallah. Someone said, I'll answer this question first because this brother might have to go. Said, I have $600 sitting in an account and I paid zakat on it this year. If the money remains in the same account, do I pay zakat on the remaining next year? Yes. So if you pay $600 on if you had $1,000 in your savings account or in your savings that you paid zakat on this year, and then next year you still got 1,000 or you got 900, then you pay zakat on that 900. Every year, whatever you got that's wealth in excess of what you need, you pay zakat on. See, Ishaq, I'm reading your statements, but as I read it, you said you had something to share. If you could go ahead and take yourself off mute and share that, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So about the person who asked about home loans. There's a company named Ijara CDC, Community Development Corporation. They have a product where their scholars have said that they can convert the loan, a riba loan, to a riba free loan. And so, and it costs them maybe less than a monthly payment, but the payment doesn't change. The terms don't change. Is something with the how the payment is calculated that changes. And so if that, I think that may be a good option to go get a conventional loan, you know, at the FHA 3 point something percent or whatever it is down, and then do that product. Where they say that their scholars say that you can convert it from a riba to a riba free loan. So that may be an option. I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah. And the question I had was about those who have retirement accounts.
Yep.
Right. But we don't have access to those funds. Right. We can't use it or anything like that. So it's at this point, right, it's not really ours, if you will, until we retire. Do we pay on that, or do we wait till we actually have access to those funds?
Right. So the basic answer is I don't know. To give a little bit more detail, I've encountered two different opinions about that from just basic research. I have not yet had the opportunity to like really study this material with somebody who has like expertise in like Islamic finance and stuff like that. That's an area where, you know, we need more people who have that kind of expertise. You know, one person who I actually kind of like in terms of what he has to say about these issues is Sheikh Yasser Qadi. I would recommend people who want to do a little more research, check out some of his lectures. He's somebody who was trained in Saudi and who for many years was, I think we could say, a part of the Salafi movement. He has since kind of evolved into a much more, I think, balanced and sophisticated view. He's more or less Hanbali, but has respect for all the different madahib. So, you know, I'm not saying that he's the be all and end all and you got to take everything he says, but I think he's a good resource. And for questions like this in particular, I like to use him as a basic general resource. Obviously, nothing takes the place of being able to ask a qualified scholar questions about your specific situation. But for just building our own literacy about this, I would say check out some of what he has to say. But to answer your question, some say that if there are penalties and restrictions imposed on you if you take out the money from your retirement loan early, then you do not have to pay zakat on that until after you get access to it. Exactly like you said, it's not your money until you get access to it. If you try to get access on it early, you got to pay all these fees. So some say because of that, you don't have to pay zakat. Others say you do have to pay zakat on it because it's a part of your net worth. So I've heard both opinions. I don't know enough to be able to say that one opinion is stronger than the other, you know? So we can kind of learn more about that together, inshallah ta'ala. But I can say both of them seem to be valid opinions from just my cursory research and conversations with people. But, you know, I'm actually trying to sort this out for my own situation now. It's my first time really having to think about 401ks or anything like that, right? So I don't really feel comfortable saying, you know, you should do this or that. My personal practice is I err on the side of pain. You know what I'm saying? So, but I don't want to just put that out there for everybody to follow because I don't want to put an undue hardship on anyone. So we got to do a little more research. But the short answer is both opinions are out there. And the logic. Now, if you have a 401k or a retirement fund of some sort that doesn't charge restrictions, doesn't charge fees if you get the money early, then yes, you definitely do have to pay zakat on that. And then I think there's some who say, like there's an employee contribution and the employer contribution. and you pay zakat on, how does it go? I forget, but I think some even make a distinction between whether or not you pay on your contribution versus your employer's. So I know that's not a real direct answer, but inshallah, it's a step toward it maybe. No, I don't know anything about Joe Bradford. Tell us about him.
No, I don't know enough. Someone was saying that he's an Islamic finance person, but and specializes in Islamic finance and knows about zakat, but I don't know too much about him.
Yeah. I remember looking at something where I think I saw his name came up, and I think he said something similar to what I said. Like there's multiple opinions. I don't know which opinion he came down as being the better one, and I don't really know anything about him to say if he's good or not good. But inshallah, we can all look more into this. And then the last thing that I'll say is if you own stocks, and I don't know if this might be a little different for retirement accounts, I'm not sure, but if you just own stocks yourself, you just got stocks that you own, you pay zakat on the amount of value that increased the amount of profit that you accumulated through your stocks over the course of the year. And this is by the Western calendar. And I had to plug my phone in, it's about to die. But according to the Western or Gregorian and solar calendar, you look at how much wealth you've accumulated, how much wealth you've earned from the stocks, going up in value, right? And you pay 10.3% on that. So if you're somebody who got stocks, you look at how much money you've made off your stocks over the course of the year, and you pay 10.3% on that. If you own cryptocurrency, and my phone is about to die. Hold on, let me charge it. I'm sorry if you might be running around while we're on the Zoom call. I know it might be disorienting. Okay, I'm sorry. If you own cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, things like that, you pay zakat on that just like you would money. So let's say you have, $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, you pay your 2.5% on that just like you would $10,000 worth of money, because it's a currency. Even though the value of it fluctuates, you don't treat it like stocks, you treat it like cash. And that's all I have. We've gone well over what I wanted to go time-wise, and some of that's because people ask questions. Oh, I'm sorry, Sister Zainab. I'm sorry, I missed your hand. I see you. I think you had your hand up for a while too. Well, you had a question? Yeah,
it's a two-parter. My first question is, so when it comes to when you calculate all the money that you have to pay for zakat al-mal, I heard that if someone owes you money, that you can say just, you don't have to worry about paying me back, and you can count that as towards your zakat al-mal. But I wanted to know, does that apply to a family member?
SubhanAllah, I don't know. You mean the family member is the person who owes you money?
Yeah.
So no, not if it's a person in your immediate, not if it's your dependent. So if you have or not even a dependent, but someone in your immediate family, like your child, right? Or your parent. I don't think you can say
like sibling.
Sibling, I think there's some that's a gray area, right? I think that's the gray area. So I don't know with a sibling. We have to ask somebody else about that. I know if it's your immediate family outside of a sibling, like child to parent, you can't pay your zakat to them. Siblings, I think that there's some difference of opinion, but you definitely can give zakat to your extended family. So your cousin, something like that, you can give zakat to those people. And that actually reminds me of another point that's important. They say it's best when you give zakat to start locally. So you have a responsibility first and foremost to the community in your place of residence. Now, if you want to give your zakat money overseas, that's permissible. That's permissible. People do it all the time, but it's good to kind of prioritize, your local community. You don't want to be in a community where there's a clear need and you're sending all your money overseas, right? So you start locally, then you go out to, maybe your extended family that or actually I flip it, right? Maybe you start with your extended family, then you go to the broader community, and then you look at what you want to do kind of overseas or whatever. And I know in our community, we have a lot of people that sort of live transnationally between here and Senegal, right? So in that case, I would say, if you can give both, give both. Maybe split your zakat, however much it is, big or small. Maybe you do half with some kind of local masjid or local institution or local person that is in need, and then you take the other half and you maybe send it to Senegal if that's what you desire to do, right? Because you feel that Senegal is just as much home, in Medina Bay. Or you can choose, but the scholars say it's good to prioritize home. You have an obligation to where you reside. And like I said, some people, they live transnational. They live here and their children are in Medina Bay, or half the year they're here, half the year they're there, right? But if you're someone who your life is basically here, then you should be looking to address the needs here as a priority, right? Also, in terms of giving your zakat to organizations, right? You can give to organizations. There's big debate about this among scholars too. Should you give it to the organization? Should you give it to needy people? The easy way to navigate it for us living in this time is, I would say, give your zakat. If you're going to give it to organization, give your zakat either to a religious institution like a masjid that is going to distribute your zakat for you to the needy people, or to an imam or a sheikh, that is managing a community and is going to give your zakat money to the needy people, right? Now, if you want to give it to an institution beyond that, give it to an institution that has been deemed zakat eligible by some kind of scholars, and if you'll look at certain institutions, certain Islamic charities, they'll say, we're zakat eligible. You can give our zakat to us. And if you dig a little deeper, you can go and look at who are some of the scholars or Islamic institutions that gave them the stamp to be zakat eligible. So, I've given my zakat in the past to organizations like Nasr Ilm America, which, is like one of our community organizations for the Tijani Jumat. I've given my zakat to an organization called Believers Bailout, which actually uses zakat money to help free incarcerated Muslims who are held incarcerated through bail. The system of bail in this country is horrible. It's really a form of slavery, right? And there are Muslim scholars who have agreed with that, and so they've deemed this organization, Believers Bailout, as a zakat eligible institution. So sometimes I give zakat money there. There are Islamic schools, and this is something where you get difference of opinion. Some scholars say, nah, a school would be, outside of the pale of what, really you should be giving your zakat to. Others would say, no, you can give it to a school, right? So I would say with that, kind of go with an imam or a sheikh that you trust and ask their advice. Like, there are times when I've been a part of communities and I went to the imam and said, I want to give my zakat to this community because this is where I'm at. This is where I'm benefiting from. What's the best way? Do I give it to you and you give it to the poor people? And they may say, well, actually, where we have the most need is our school. And as the imam who's educated and who's, has a certain level of scholarship, I'm saying that you have the right to give it to the school. And I've been in that situation and gave it to the school, so you have some room to kind of figure, and this is, the way I try to teach and the way my teachers taught me is you're going to have to navigate some of these things on your, not on your own, but you're going to have to make some decisions about some of these things. It's not so cookie cutter as to say, these are the things you can do, black and white. These are the things you can't do, black and white. And I know what things you can and can't do. So I'm going to tell you do this and not do that. No, sometimes there's different opinions. And so you have to decide for yourself sometimes which opinion you feel more comfortable about. Sometimes it's very clear, sometimes a little bit gray. So especially with a subject like this, which is not a subject that I have strong expertise in, I want to be careful not to present the opinions I follow as the only correct opinions, if that makes sense. But I know I answered more than what you asked, but you reminded me of some other points. So, but did I answer your question before I said all the other things?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And so, so we're gonna go ahead and close out. I'll open the floor for maybe one or two more questions if anybody else has a pressing question about the subject of zakat, inshallah, or something relevant, specific to the Ramadan that maybe you need to ask as we close out. Any final questions, inshallah? Okay, alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair. May Allah reward all of you, accept this from all of us. May Allah accept all of your ibadah and your fasting and your intentions, good intentions during this Ramadan. May Allah forgive us all for all of our shortcomings. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الأخلاق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله قدر العظيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم أرنا حقا حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا باطلا باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الهم والحزن ونعوذ بك من العجز والكسل ونعوذ بك من الجن والبخل ونعوذ بك من الخذل والقهر الرجال. Oh Allah, we seek thy refuge from anxiety and grief. We seek thy refuge from lack of strength and laziness. We seek thy refuge from cowardliness and miserliness. And we seek thy refuge from debt and oppression at the hands of people. Bijay Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. And I see Yahya, I see you had your hand raised. So people need to go. We're closing out, but you can ask that question too, inshallah.
It's off topic, but
sure.
if you take a shower and you want to make wudu, can you make wudu in the shower, or do you have to get out and get dressed and then make wudu?
Alhamdulillah. You can make wudu in the shower. You can make wudu in the shower as a part of your ghusl, and it's permissible. It is mustahab. It is liked and advisable if you cover your private part while you make the wudu. And so you don't have to get out the shower and get dressed and everything. But one of the things that they advise is you can like wrap a towel around yourself or something like that, even while you're still in the shower, and make your wudu as a part of your ghusl. But if a person didn't do that and they just made wudu in the ghusl, their ghusl would still be valid. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for the question. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Jamaat. Inshallah, we'll see you next week, inshallah. Eid Mubarak, an early Eid Mubarak to everyone. Pray everyone has a blessed Eid, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, you and your family. Blessed Eid.
Ameen.
Everybody, inshallah.
Ameen.
Everybody.
Ameen.